Tonight on Bridge City News, a judge has said no to a Lethbridge couple to have their case dismissed in connection with the death of their 19-month-old son 7 years ago. Today is National Indigenous Peoples Day. We will tell you about some of the celebrations taking place in our city. And now that the feds have approved the Trans Mountain Pipeline expansion again, will that mean actual shovels in the ground? The National Post's Tyler Dawson gives us his thoughts.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Good evening. Thanks so much for joining us. A judge has rejected a defense application to dismiss the case against a couple charged in the meningitis death of their son. David and Colette Stephan are on trial for allegedly failing to provide the necessaries of life to their 19-month-old son Ezekiel, who died in 2012. They treated him with alternative therapies before eventually calling 911, but he later died of bacterial meningitis. The defense lawyer says the prosecution failed to prove that Ezekiel would not have died if he'd received medical attention within 48 hours of his death. The judge disagreed, and the defense will start its case on Monday. Lethbridge police need our help identifying a suspect wanted in connection with a robbery at the Southside Walmart yesterday. Authorities say a 78-year-old woman was accosted by two men in the parking lot and her wallet was stolen. The perps began using her credit cards immediately in Lethbridge and then west in Revelstoke, British Columbia. The first male is described as East Indian, around 30 years of age with a fair complexion. The second male is also East Indian as well, but shorter with a stocky build. If you have any information that can help police, call Crime Stoppers right away at 1-800-222-8477. For the past 29 years, Streets Alive mission has served many homeless and marginalized people. It comes as no surprise they have expanded and now successfully launched their Genesis Women's Program. BCN's Loris Alexander has more.
We have been running the Ask Learning Center now for 5 or 6 years in our Streets Alive building, and we just felt it was time to move it out of that location and into its own location.
The Genesis program has a system navigator staff, instructors that teach faith-based curriculum, and professional counselors.
The whole vision of it was to be able to navigate people through difficulties in their life, navigate them through systems, because sometimes systems can be quite prohibitive.
4 years ago, Shauna Clark became sober through Streets Alive mission and now wants to help other women do the same.
I get to help other women who are in the same hopeless state of mind that I was in at one time. And now I get to direct them and navigate them and help them and show them what recovery really is about. So it's my pleasure to be able to help them to be able to move into a new beginning in their lives.
Kissick says Genesis was birthed out of what they saw as a great need. The idea was to fill the gap from treatment and merge into society safely. For Bridge City News, I'm Loris Alexander.
Dozens of people gathered at Lethbridge City Hall today for National Indigenous Peoples Day and the raising of the Blackfoot Confederacy flag. A number of politicians and members of the Indigenous community spoke about what this day means to them. Mayor Chris Spearman says the youth in our community are an integral part of reconciliation with our Indigenous community.
I think our younger people really do get it. I think our younger people are already understanding at a much better rate than some people my age, you know, and of course I have to admit it's been an education process for myself. We've lived in two solitudes for decades, and we haven't recognized why that's not healthy.
It's very important. Of course, we know that racism and homelessness exist, and the more we learn about intergenerational trauma and what Indigenous people have experienced through colonization, makes us better understand why these people, end up this way. And I think when we can start looking at that in a compassionate way and understanding the why, then, I think people will become healthier, and, well, that's the hope anyways.
Lethbridge has been celebrating our Indigenous community all week with various activities organized until June 25th. The Southern Alberta Art Gallery is also paying tribute to our Indigenous peoples, and they're doing so through color.
Haley Heavyshield just released her first book, and she'll be reading excerpts from that. And we also have the great pleasure of a performance by Seth Cardinal Dodging Horse. And we are also serving up some fry bread by Tico Ironshirt and Will Singer from Lethbridge's very own Chief Mountain.
Stories
The library saved her. Today is really a celebration, particularly with this book. This is my first book, and I believe poetry is somewhat like the Blackfoot language because it's such a beautiful expression of ourselves and of our spirit. And I'd really like to encourage our youth to as well to try poetry.
Heavy Shield's first book of poems, Nidawassin, is available for purchase at SAG. Tonight is guaranteed win night at Spitz Stadium. If the Lethbridge Bulls do not pull out a win tonight, everyone who bought a ticket is guaranteed for a free game ticket for the next home game. The Bulls surrendered a 13-1 loss to the Medicine Hat Mavericks on Thursday before the rain ended the game in the 6th inning. Ainsley O'Reilly explains the optimism surrounding the team.
The Lethbridge Bulls fell to 10-8 on the season, but prior to Thursday's game, the team was looking for their 5th straight win. Last weekend's road trip was successful, with pitchers Ben Irwin and Logan Bexton going complete games against the Yorkton Cardinals.
You know, it's nice when your starter goes out there and, you know, they're dominant early and gives your offense a chance to get going. And, you know, they've been really big for us. And, you know, we got to keep that good starting pitching going.
A lot of our guys that are coming out of the bullpen right now are, they're coming in and they're filling it up. And, I enjoy watching that. And our hitters 1 through 9 have been timely and it's been good.
There's not a whole lot of returning arms on this team. I mean, I think there's just a few of us, and we're taking on a bit of a leadership role and helping the guys out, teaching them about the Wimble, you know, what to expect. And I think we're all starting to gel together pretty well, and I think we have a great staff for the rest of the year.
Given the short period of time the Bulls have to get to know each other, head coach Jesse Sawyer says he can see them gelling early.
We're meshing as a team and we're coming together, and, you know, I just like this group of guys and, you know, how we go out there and compete every night.
Like this past road trip was good. We were able to go for dinner a lot and hang out in the hotel with different groups of guys, not just like our own cliques kind of thing. So it's been good. The clubhouse has been loose.
Friday evening kicks off at 7:05 Mountain Time as the Bulls continue to strive for top spot in the Western Conference. For Bridge City News, I'm Ainsley O'Reilly.
More than 700 residents of Paddle Prairie Métis Settlement were given the okay to return home yesterday after a wildfire evacuation order was lifted. Unfortunately, 60 homes were destroyed by the massive Chuckhead Creek wildfire and another 15 were damaged. Community members have been out of their homes for more than 3 weeks. While residents were headed back to Paddle Prairie, about 200 other people had to leave their homes in Mackenzie County due to wildfires. Officials say close to 7,500 people are still out of their communities. As you've heard on BCN, the federal government has approved the Trans Mountain Pipeline expansion yet again. But will we actually see shovels go into the ground, and if so, when? I put that question to Tyler Dawson, who's the Alberta correspondent for the National Post.
Best guess scenario is probably about 2022. That seems to be the estimates that are floating around right now. Government officials certainly refuse to stick to a timeline on that sort of thing. Politicians were a bit wishy-washy about that. Understandably, no one wants to overpromise and underdeliver. So unfortunately, we'll have to wait and see, but best bet, a few years down the line.
Watch the full interview with legislative reporter Tyler Dawson talking oil and some of the biggest stories coming out of Edmonton. That's coming up after business news. The Senate passed Bill C-48 Thursday evening. The controversial bill legally enforces a moratorium on oil tankers in northern British Columbia. MLA for Lethbridge East, Nathan Newdorf, says the bill is not good for the Alberta economy.
Given the amount of work the Premier, the Minister of Energy, and the entire caucus has spent working with senators, working with the federal government to explain how deeply impactful this is for our industry and our oil. So after all that work, to have it to carry on and become legislation is very discouraging. It really forces our hand to take things to the next level and appeal to the higher courts to make sure that we get our voices heard. This is very crucial not only for Alberta, but for all of Canada.
The Senate also passed Bill C-69, or as Alberta Premier Jason Kenney refers to it, as the No More Pipelines Law. Kenney says if Albertans cannot develop our resources within Federation, then we should not be expected to pay the bills in the Federation. Our province has become the latest to file a court challenge of the federal carbon tax. The UCP government says the reference to Alberta's Court of Appeal challenges the constitutionality of the tax being imposed on provinces that do not have their own carbon pricing systems. It argues the federal tax undermines Alberta's exclusive constitutional power to manage its own natural resources, carbon plan, and economy. The federal tax is due to take effect on January 1st after the UCP scrapped the Alberta carbon tax imposed by the former NDP government. Now, speaking of the NDP, they say Premier Jason Kenney was laughing as he passed out earplugs during a recent debate on Bill 9, the legislation to strip away some public sector bargaining rights. New Democrat Thomas Dang said Kenney handed out earplugs to more than 20 UCP members so they could tune out opposition criticism during an all-night session. Kenney's office says it was a harmless attempt to boost government caucus morale amid what was being described as hours of NDP insults and lies. MLA for Lethbridge East, Nathan Newdorf, says the passing of Bill 9, which suspends contract negotiations until October 31st, was necessary for the UCP government to have sufficient time to gather more information.
The Wage Deferral Act, we want to just make sure that we are getting all the information on the table before we start into these contract negotiations and arbitration. And because all of these public sector unions are linked, they impact one another. So we want to make sure that we have all the information in hand first from the Blue Ribbon panel, make sure we have that information in hand before we enter into those negotiations and do them fairly, openly, uprightly with all the information.
The bill delaying public sector contract provisions to reopen wage talks was passed less than a week after it was introduced. Manitoba Premier Brian Pallister has called an election a year early. The Premier has set the election date for September 10th of this year. That is more than a year before the fixed election date of October 6th, 2020. When asked about a summer campaign, Pallister said he believes Manitobans are connected to the issues. When asked about the date, he says it's an excellent time to decide the future of the province. Ontario Finance Minister Vic Fedeli is one of the several high-profile ministers demoted in a major cabinet shuffle announced by Ontario Premier Doug Ford. Environment Minister Rod Phillips will replace Fedeli. Fedeli moves on to economic development. Lisa MacLeod, who upset parents earlier over her handling of the autism file as Minister of Children and Social Services, moves over to tourism. Lisa Thompson goes from education to government and consumer services. Canada's top judge says there is slow but sure progress toward more timely justice in Canadian courts after years of backlogs and delays. Supreme Court Justice Richard Wagner says things are on the right path almost 3 years after the High Court set out timelines for completing criminal trials.
It's such a big problem, the delays, the cost, that it will take time. But I think we're on the right path because we have to change not only operational instruments, but we have to change also the way people think. Now that takes more time than changing instruments or guidelines. But I think that now people realize that it's in the best interest of society on the long run to make sure that steps are taken to shorten the delays, lower the costs, fund the system, and I think we're getting there slowly but surely.
Federal Conservative leader Andrew Scheer says his climate plan will be Canada's best chance to hit its target under the Paris Climate Change Agreement and that it can happen without a carbon tax. He says the Tories' plan is built on 3 guiding principles.
Number 1, green technology, not taxes. Number 2, a cleaner and greener natural environment. And number 3, taking the climate change fight global. This plan is the most comprehensive environmental platform ever put forward by a political party in Canada, in far surpassing anything Justin Trudeau put out before the 2015 election.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and U.S. President Donald Trump sought to demonstrate a united front in an effort to replace the old NAFTA agreement. Trudeau says he rejects the idea of reopening the NAFTA deal.
We've obviously said a number of times that we are very pleased with the deal we were able to secure that ensures good jobs and good outcomes for Canadians and indeed people in all three of our countries. And we are concerned that any reopening of NAFTA could lead to not just lengthy further negotiations that we all were quite pleased were behind us, but also may lead to worse outcomes for Canadians and for Canada.
Trudeau also commented for the first time on Quebec's new law prohibiting public servants from wearing religious symbols. He said it is not a government's responsibility to legislate what people wear.
We do not feel that it is a government's responsibility or in a government's interest to legislate on what people should be wearing. We have a strong Charter of Rights and Freedoms that guarantees freedom of religion, freedom of expression, and we will certainly ensure that our views are well known and continue to defend Canadians' rights.
Authorities say teenagers in Alaska hoping to cash in on a fake $9 million online offer brutally killed a woman on a popular trail outside of Anchorage. Police say 19-year-old Cynthia Hoffman was shot in the back of her head and her body was dumped into a river.
There's a takeaway at this point. It's that for all the good the internet can do, it can be a very dark place. And parents would be wise to monitor the activity of their children online.
If you're listening to my voice, not in Alaska, but somewhere else, and you're sitting in your mom's basement and you're planning to do some type of crime, influence, plan, or conduct a crime in Alaska, and you think you're safe because you're that far away, you're not. We will track you down, we will find you, and we will bring you back here to face justice.
Some great new movies are playing at the Movie Mill this weekend. For more, here's Len Binning with another Movie Mill Minute.
The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings are two of the most beloved books on the planet, written by none other than J.R. Tolkien. In this self-titled film, we take a look at his young life, his love, his friendships, his experience in World War I, all the things that went to shape him and what he would ultimately share with the world.
Tell me a story.
It's a story about journeys. The journeys we take to prove ourselves. It's about adventures. It's about potent magic, a magic beyond anything anyone has ever felt before.
We have a family-friendly show starring Ryan Reynolds. It revolves around Detective Harry Goodman, who goes missing. His 21-year-old son is on the case and needs to find answers. He ends up partnering with none other than Detective Pikachu, who's voiced by Ryan Reynolds.
Whoever you are, I know how to use this.
Oh, jeez. Here we go.
I know, you can't understand me, but put down the stapler or I will electrocute you.
Canada's Keanu Reeves is back in John Wick Chapter 3. This one's maybe not for the kids. In fact, Mom and Dad, you may want to enjoy this one on your own. John has now got a price tag on his head, $14 million, and every unsavory character is out to get him.
John Wick, excommunicado in effect in 3, 2, 1.
And away we go.
A great weekend for seeing a few movies at the Mill. There's more rain in the forecast tonight through Sunday. Complete weather details are coming up. We had more isolated showers today for the first official day of summer. Tonight, a chance of thunder showers developing with a low near 10 degrees. Tomorrow, good chance of rain again and a high near 19. Sunday, a chance of showers with a high expected near 18. The clouds should clear out on Monday, bringing us lots of sunshine and a high near 20. Tuesday, even warmer, with the mercury climbing to 22. A low pressure system returns on Wednesday, bringing more clouds and a high near 19. Thursday, the rain returns with a high near 20 degrees. Looking at the almanac, the average high for this time of year is 23 and an average low of 9. The highest temperature on this date was recorded in 1970 at 33 degrees, and the record low was 3 in 1996. Sunrise was at 5:24, sunset at 9:43. Looking at the national forecast for tomorrow now, Victoria will be mainly sunny and 20. Just a few clouds in Vancouver and a high near 20 as well. Calgary had a rainfall warning today. Tomorrow mainly sunny with a high of 19. Edmonton will have showers and a high of 20. Rain at 16 for Regina tomorrow. Showers and 17 for Saskatoon. Rain and 20 on tap for Winnipeg on Saturday. Sunshine and 25 for Toronto. Sunny as well and 26 degrees for Ottawa. Just a few clouds and 25 for Montreal. In the Maritimes, Fredericton had a rainfall warning today. Tomorrow, a mixture of sun and cloud and a high near 21. Halifax will have showers and 15. Charlottetown will have rain and 14. And in St. John's, expect light showers and a high near 19 degrees tomorrow. Alberta has become the latest province to file a court challenge of the federal carbon tax. The UCP government says the reference to the Alberta Court of Appeal challenges the constitutionality of the tax being imposed on provinces that do not have their own carbon pricing systems. It argues the province should be the one to manage its own economy, natural resources, and carbon emissions plan. The federal tax is scheduled to take effect on January 1st. Walmart has agreed to pay $282 million to settle U.S. federal allegations of overseas corruption. That includes funneling more than $500,000 to an intermediary in Brazil who is known to make construction permit problems disappear. U.S. authorities went after Walmart under the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, which prohibits American companies operating overseas from using bribery and other illegal methods. Close to 27% of Hudson Bay shareholders voted against a $29.4 million compensation package for the struggling retailer's top executives in a secret meeting this week. The shareholders voted against the retailer's approach to executive compensation, which it says is designed to retain and attract top executives. Company officials say the pay package includes roughly $1.6 million in base salary and about $19.6 million in share-based awards along with other compensation. The non-binding resolution comes amid a proposal by a group of shareholders that includes Executive Chairman Richard Baker to take the company private. Manulife Financial has formed a joint venture with a financial services company in India. Mahindra and Mahindra Financial Services says the joint venture is aimed at expanding the depth of fund offerings and retail fund penetration in India. Mahindra Finance has more than 5 million customers and over 1,300 offices across India. The companies say the joint venture brings together Mahindra's domestic market strength with Manulife's global wealth and asset management capabilities. Now, here's a look at today's markets. Recapping one of our top stories this hour, the province has become the latest to file a court challenge of the federal carbon tax. The UCP government says the reference to Alberta's Court of Appeal challenges the constitutionality of the tax being imposed on provinces that do not have their own carbon pricing systems. It argues the federal tax undermines Alberta's exclusive constitutional power to manage its own natural resources, a carbon plan, and economy. The federal tax is slated to take effect on January 1st. So Ottawa has approved the Trans Mountain Pipeline yet again, but when will we actually see shovels in the ground? Alberta correspondent with the National Post, Tyler Dawson, gives us his thoughts next. But first, here's a look at what's happening in and around your community.
Here's your Bridge City News community calendar. Come out to the Lethbridge Handmade Market on Saturday, June 22nd at Exhibition Park's main pavilion from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. Discover unique finds made by the hands of local artisans. Also, enjoy live music, a Kids Create station, community painting, food trucks, and more. For details, visit lethbridgehandmademarket.ca. The Family Center downtown has a unique program called Me and My Dad, which uses fun to create a healthy environment for dads to play with their kids. It's a great place for fathers to build strong relationships with their children. This program runs on Saturdays from 9:30 to 11:30 a.m. It's open to all fathers of children under the age of 6. For more information, visit famcenter.ca. Get your dance shoes on and learn East Coast Swing. The Swing Bridge Dance Club meets Mondays at the Eagles Hall from 7:30 to 9:30 p.m. Come by yourself or with a partner. Beginner to expert levels are welcome. For more details, call Sheldon at 403-393-8566 or email swingbridgeleth@gmail.com. And that's your Bridge City News Community Calendar.
As you've heard on Bridge City News, Ottawa gave its approval for the Trans Mountain Pipeline expansion for the second time. But will it actually be built? I know about 30% of the pipe is at the site, but will shovels actually go into the ground? To talk more about this multi-billion-dollar project is the Alberta correspondent for the National Post, Tyler Dawson. Tyler, is this cause for celebration or just more of the same from the Trudeau Liberals? Will we actually see construction begin?
Well, I would say it is cause for sort of cautious optimism. That was certainly the attitude down at the legislature yesterday. Premier Jason Kenney saying, "Oh, this is great news. This is a first step," but his focus was really on not so much getting shovels in the ground, but having oil flowing through the pipe. Now, there was a little bit of caginess yesterday from federal government officials on what exactly that was going to look like, getting shovels in the ground, that is. With 6 months left in the year, the expectation is that you will see construction begin probably sometime in September, seems to be what everyone is saying. Now, of course, we've heard that before. There have been innumerable delays caused by the courts, protesters, what have you. I would say there's no guarantees at this point when it's going to start, but certainly everyone is ready to go. There were reports over the last week or so of pipe being transported out to the site and things like that. So clearly people are ready for this to happen. And I think it is fair to say that once everyone's ready to go, construction is going to start. The question is just sort of what could halt it along the way.
Okay, what about the NDP and the Greens, and more specifically John Horgan in British Columbia? Is that little consortium there able to stop this project or obstruct it in any way?
Well, sort of, but not really. So the BC government had attempted to pass legislation a little while back that was going to allow it to restrict the flow of oil through the province. Now, that was going to be sort of a down the road thing. When this was done, they'd be able to say, oh, well, you can't actually ship your oil through it. The court said that can't happen. So basically where it exists now with this federal approval of the pipeline is that BC does still have some control over permitting aspects in terms of construction and things like that. So when John Horgan gave his press conference, that was sort of what he talked about. They're going to take a close look at any permits that come up, safety, environmental regulations that they have control over, those sorts of things. So they could perhaps make it a little bit difficult here and there. Can the BC government put sort of a real hold on this? Not really. Now, of course, there could be court action. There could be Indigenous groups that decide to go to court, as they did last time, to try and say that once again, the review the government did was inadequate in terms of consultation with Indigenous people and looking at tanker traffic off the west coast of BC. You'll remember from last August, these were the reasons that this was sort of stopped for the last 10 months or so. So there are options. And of course, the other option is that there could be protesters on site who are not allowing vehicles through, not allowing workers onto the sites, things like that. We saw a little bit of that in months past. Now, how that is handled, of course, is almost a completely separate issue from the legal arguments and whatnot. So there are ways to hold this up. Is there a way to prevent it from being done? Legally speaking, not at this point, but time will tell on some of those questions.
You know, what's interesting, though, Tyler, is how we hear about Indigenous groups that are protesting, want to obstruct the Trans Mountain Pipeline expansion, but there are actually other Indigenous groups who are not only interested in investing the pipeline expansion, but even thinking of buying it, making an offer on it.
Yeah, that's right. And part of what the Prime Minister announced yesterday was this whole side of the pipeline of TMX to try and get Indigenous groups involved in it, whether that's sort of contracting along the way, whether that is actually finding an Indigenous group or consortium to buy it. Now, there have been reports over the last year or so of Indigenous groups that are springing up that are interested in buying this thing. So the federal government is sort of planning on doing some consultations, some outreach meetings, things like that to try and find Indigenous buyers for this thing. No timeline again on that. Who knows when that's going to happen? That's an awful lot of money for any group, any consortium to pull together to purchase this thing now that the government owns it. But until that happens, the revenues that are raised from the pipeline are going to be sort of recycled back into sort of green technology and transition to a no carbon future. So that's sort of what the future looks like in terms of the actual pipeline once it's done and oil's flowing.
Now, the oil will leave in tankers, but Bill C-48, otherwise known as the anti-tanker bill, will not apply to TMX oil. Why is that?
Yeah, it was kind of interesting. I hadn't thought that much about it and then was looking around after this and I asked myself that question. And so the explanation for it basically is that Bill C-48 restricts tanker traffic from the north of Vancouver Island up to Alaska, more or less. So that means that ports in, say, Prince Rupert are not allowed to offload, oil onto tankers that carry more than 12,500 tons. Now, the oil coming through the TMX pipeline is shipped out in Vancouver at the port sort of in Burnaby there. So that means it does go through the Salish Sea, and that's where we had concerns about the southern resident killer whale population. You go through the Strait of Georgia and the Strait of Juan de Fuca and on its way out to the Pacific. So there are sort of some navigation concerns. That's a busy, busy traffic area. There are some environmental concerns involving the whales and whatnot, but there are some different sort of contextual issues up north, mainly that there has been sort of a de facto moratorium on tanker traffic for a long, long time. So oddly enough, 350 kilometers apart as the crow flies, oil tanker traffic is okay. And, above that sort of northerly red line, it's not okay. So I spoke with former Premier Christy Clark, and she said, this is just a bizarre thing, and it doesn't make any sense whatsoever. So it's an odd situation to say the least, but that's the explanation for why the oil can get out to sea without too much trouble.
So Tyler, bottom line, when will the oil be flowing?
An excellent question. Best guess scenario is probably about 2022. That seems to be the estimates that are floating around right now. Government officials certainly refuse to stick to a timeline on that sort of thing. Politicians were a bit wishy-washy about that. Understandably, no one wants to overpromise and underdeliver. So unfortunately, we'll have to wait and see, but best bet, a few years down the line.
So how important is the Trans Mountain Pipeline expansion to the Alberta economy and even bigger picture, the Canadian economy?
It's the pipeline itself, it's hard to say exactly. The larger issue in all of this, of course, is the matter of how you're getting oil out of the country. The present problem being that most pipelines are running to the United States. That's where all the buyers are. You need to take trains to get the oil sort of out to the coast at the moment. There's all these sort of transportation issues right now that, as people will remember from last year, led to this massive, massive price differential. Canadian oil was selling at a significant discount because there simply wasn't enough pipeline capacity. Now, that number, the Alberta government said, was something approximating $80 million a day is what was being lost from lack of pipeline capacity. Now, there's some debate over that number. It could have been 40 million, could have been 100 million, but no matter how you look at it, the lack of pipeline capacity is costing the Alberta economy and sort of by extension, the Canadian economy, millions and millions of dollars a day. And TMX is part of increasing that capacity to get oil to markets, which closes that price differential that was costing so much money and starts bringing that money back into government coffers, the pockets of private citizens, all those sorts of things. So those are sort of the numbers that are bouncing around on that.
So Premier Jason Kenney was in New Brunswick recently talking about the importance of getting our oil to the East Coast so Maritimers don't have to purchase Saudi oil. Any chances of Energy East being revived somehow?
Well, the Premier seems to think so. I think it is a debatable point whether or not there is a business case to be made for this project at this point in time. But the last time that this was seriously discussed was when the political sort of geography of Canada looked very, very different. You have a good number of conservative premiers in power right now. You have reasonably business-friendly politicians in Quebec in power right now. And you have a premiers meeting coming up in just a few weeks here where Jason Kenney surely is going to make that a big issue. I think for the Alberta government, that's very much a desired thing. I do suspect the wild card on that is whether or not you're going to find private money that's willing to risk perhaps doing this thing and, going through the hurdles that these big infrastructure projects need to in 2019.
Okay, we'll leave oil for just a moment here. Tyler, the Privacy Commissioner took an unusual step of speaking out on Tuesday, saying students who join gay-straight alliances are protected by privacy legislation. So Tyler, in short, the claims of the NDP that the new education legislation will allow schools to out kids are not entirely accurate.
Yeah, that's right. So the NDP has a reasonably fair point to make, I think, in saying that some of the changes over gay-straight alliances maybe weaken protections, maybe don't make it as good for kids in school in terms of principals having to speedily allow these alliances to be created and things like that. But yeah, the main objection that they've been raising is that it's going to allow principals in schools or what have you to out kids to their parents. Now, the UCP said all along that this protection was derived from the Privacy Act. And that's more or less the case. The right to have your activities in school be kept private when it's something so intimate. These are protections not laid out in education legislation, not under the NDP, not under the UCP. So that took the wind out of the NDP's sails a little bit. And as people will know, this has been quite a contentious thing down at the legislature over the last couple months, and was on the campaign trail as well. So it was an unusual statement, but it did sort of back the UCP on that, saying, well, no, this is privacy legislation, and no Education Act can really tinker with those rights all that much.
More than 9,000 people have been forced from their homes in northern Alberta once again. Tyler, firefighters are praying for more rain and cooler temperatures to help battle the blazes. I mean, the Chuckegg Creek wildfire is now more than 270,000 hectares in size. It appears we're not out of the woods just yet.
No, it's a shame that the Edmonton weather isn't moving north at a faster pace, because it's been pouring rain this week down here. So yeah, that's right. There are evacuation alerts in place. There are evacuation notices in place. This thing is by no means nearly finished. And, to this point, still, thankfully, there have not been any major catastrophes. But as they say with wildfire season, it's nowhere near done yet.
Okay, let's chat about labor rights now. It's been a very hot button topic at the legislature. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, so the Coles Notes version of it is that the UCP has introduced legislation that is going to sort of push back the timeline on wage negotiations for a bunch of unionized public servants, nurses, and things like that. So what had happened was some years ago, they had agreed to a wage freeze, and then they were going to be able to go into arbitration after that. There could be binding arbitration on the negotiation. So some of these groups of employees have entered into these wage negotiations. Now, the government has put in place legislation, or is working on legislation in the legislature, that would push back those previous guarantees of entering into wage negotiations. So understandably, unions are upset because people had expected to be negotiating their salaries at this point in time. And the NDP is really upset about this. You had people shouting shame, shame in the legislature in debates on this. And it is sort of part of what Jason Kenney had been promising during the campaign in his opening days as premier, that there was going to have to be a little bit of belt tightening, and that the finances were in rough shape, and so on and so forth. Nevertheless, very contentious, certainly affecting an awful lot of public servants around the province. People are not happy, and these sort of wage and labor disputes, it doesn't matter who's in government on these things. No one really ends up looking that great at the end of it. It's a nasty business. The federal level, provincial, it doesn't matter. It's a tough one.
Okay, let's go back to oil for just a moment here. During the campaign, there was a lot of talk of, by Rachel Notley, who was premier at the time of the NDP, supporting the oil pipelines. But I remember not that long ago when Rachel Notley was very anti-pipeline. Lethbridge West MLA here, Shannon Phillips, was very anti-pipeline. But of course, when they were trying to get the TMX expansion, it was like, let's go pro-pipeline. But now that they're no longer in government, has the sentiment changed with the NDP? Are some of the members now, the MLA members, against oil now? Or are they still very much pro-pipeline?
They seem to certainly be very much pro-pipeline still. I mean, it was this sort of weird phenomenon, wasn't it, where the sort of space for debate on pipeline politics in Alberta narrowed very, very quickly. And all of a sudden, anyone who wanted to be in government was not going to be able to hold an anti-pipeline view. I would say that their objection for the last several weeks, months even, to Jason Kenney's politics and that of the UCP is they just sort of don't think that he's going about it the right way. They think the sort of bombastic attitude, the threats of an equalization referendum, the traveling around the province, or the country, I should say, meeting with other conservative premiers and things like that. They just don't see that as very tactical politics. That, you know, if you tick people off, well, they're not going to support this. You're not going to have the, you know, what everyone called the social license for these things. So no, they are still pro-pipeline. I think they probably have to be in many ways. The dispute continues, I think, to be about tactics.
Alberta correspondent with the National Post, Tyler Dawson, joining me once again from soggy Edmonton. Thanks a lot, Tyler.
Thanks, Al.
Summer will be here before you know it. And with that comes summer camps for our kids. Joining me now in studio to chit-chat a bit about it is John Gartley, the Executive Director of Southern Alberta Bible Camp. Welcome to Bridge City News, John.
Hey, thanks for having me, Al.
So let's talk a bit about, like, I love summer camp when I was a kid. We had so much fun, archery, canoeing, all the hiking. What goes on with the Southern Alberta Bible Camp?
Well, we're right on the Trevor's Reservoir. So there's a beautiful lake there. I mean, the property was given to us in 1981 by the Ruggles family, and there's not a stick on it. But we have kids that come. We run camps for 1,700 kids every summer. They come. They start on Sunday night and they go till Friday night, and they live in a cabin full of 8 kids their own age, and there's it's full of activities all week long.
Now, you guys are located in Lomond, Alberta, not far from a lake there. So tell me about some of the fun marine activities that the kids partake in.
Yeah, absolutely. Like there's canoeing, fishing. I never would have thought it, but fishing is actually one of the favorite skills there. I mean,
what kind of fish?
Activities? Man, I'm not a fisherman,
Trout,
but there's
salmon, pickerel?
No, there's no salmon. But you know, there's perch out there. There's walleye. There's jackfish and whitefish for sure. So, but you know, these kids, like, they catch these fish, and it's just some of these kids, they never go fishing. They come, they catch this fish, and it's unbelievable. We got a partnership with Water Ski Wakeboard Alberta, so we do water ski wakeboarding out there. We do kayaking, canoeing, lots of swimming because it gets pretty hot out there, and we even do some sailing programs. So, I mean, a lot of our program, it's kind of the centerpiece of the camp. That lake is right there, and we just want to use it. It's just God-given, you know, like, there it is. It's amazing.
Now, John, this is a Christian camp. Do you ever have non-Christian campers who come out as well? Yeah,
so of our 1,700 kids, fully, probably, I know 2/3 of our kids actually don't attend church on a regular basis, and fully 1/3 don't attend church at all. And so they come to Southern Alberta Bible Camp. And it's a neat opportunity that we have because you know, I mean, we're very clear on what our mission is. We want to have a lot of fun with the kids, and we want to do all these activities that I explained before, but we also want to share the gospel. So it's an opportunity that we can share the gospel with every kid that comes. And I don't know, it's neat to see the Lord change lives through that.
So how about some of the kids that maybe are raised in Hindu homes, Muslim homes, or Buddhist homes?
Yeah.
Have they ever attended?
Well, it's funny. I had a call from a parent from Calgary who phoned me. He said his daughter had been invited to come to this Southern Alberta Bible Camp by a friend, and he said, "What is this about? Like, you're a Bible camp?" It was very clear on what it is, and so I was able to talk about who Jesus was and that he came and he died on the cross for our sins. It's all written in the Bible. He rose again, and that we might be saved. And he said, "That's the message we share. You know, we don't get into a lot of the details about the differences, but we just want to share about this person of Jesus." And you know, the guy on the other end of the line, he just kind of said, "Sounds like a pretty good message. I think I'm going to send my kid to camp." So
wow, that's tremendous.
Yeah.
So tell me about some of the kids' lives that have been changed by attending the camp and gave their lives to Christ. Yeah.
Well, it's a story I've been telling recently. I actually just heard it about a month ago. Was a number of years ago. These 2 kids. siblings came to camp, and through that week, they through hearing the gospel message or the campfires or whatever, they became Christians. And they went home, and their dad overheard them praying in their room, "Lord, please help my parents to become Christians." And so he was a little bit upset about this because he didn't really know like what kind of indoctrination this camp did with their kids. Like, what are they praying? I'm fine, But he made the decision in his head that he was going to figure out who this Jesus was. And so through his friends, and he did some, he did some seeking about who Jesus was. He became a Christian himself. And the later part of the story is that he actually mentored another individual who became a pastor in a church in one of our Southern Alberta churches. So it's kind of neat. Yeah.
Now, you've been involved with the Southern Alberta Bible Camp for about 28 years now?
28 years, yeah.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
Over those years, did you ever receive pushback from parents who were non-believers, saying, my kid came home and they're brainwashed, I'm not happy? Anything like that? Do you ever receive anything like that? No?
We're a Bible camp, and that's what we are. We're not Southern Alberta Camp, right? We're not trying to hide that piece of it, and so it's on our web page, it's in all our writings, and the only pushback maybe, and this is what we train our staff, is some of our staff in the past can get very zealous and very strong, as far as this is you.
On fire for the Lord, right?
On fire for the Lord, and they've got good hearts, but the gospel just wasn't presented in a very good way. So we spent a lot of time talking to our staff. Listen, like, these kids are coming from homes that, they've been brought up a certain way, and they're coming to us for a week. And so what are we going to do? What kind of memories are we going to give them? We want to show them that they're loved. We want to tell them about Jesus, who loves them unconditionally, that he, again, and who he is, and introduce them to the Bible and what the Bible says. And then stories from our own lives, about how God changed our lives and how he works in our lives. And so we want those memories to go home with these kids and they're going back to those homes, right? And so it's a memory, it's a seed that's planted, and who knows down the road,
So tell me about some of those kids then, John, who gave their lives to Christ at camp and then became a shining beacon on the hill for their families.
Oh, man.
Well,
that was one that I shared already.
Right, yeah.
I got a good friend who's a pastor in BC now, but he came as a kid. He had ADHD, and his mom wasn't going to give him any pills, and he said, go to camp. So he came to camp, and he came over so many years, and he's been a blessing. He's been a blessing to so many. He's a good friend, and now he's just doing amazing things in BC in that church there, and telling other people about Jesus. So miss him, but he's a neat guy. So
other than the spiritual growth, what other things are taught to the children at the camp? How they're able to maybe become more independent and mature?
Well, they got to go away from their mom and dad, right? And so for them to say goodbye, sometimes we have to give counseling services to parents because it's almost harder for parents to let their kids go. But it's neat to see these kids. They come, they're able to stay overnight for 5 nights. They're able to build for friendships there that they haven't had before, like new friendships, and develop relationships with adults that are there that love them as well. And so, there's issues there. They can't go to mom all the time, and so they've got to solve some of these problems themselves. But we do a lot of activities too. We do, like I said, water ski, wakeboard, Alberta. So it isn't just, hey, get in a boat, put some skis on, we'll see if you get up. We've got coaches that are trained to coach these kids how to ski. And let's face it, not a lot of people have their own boats. And so they come to camp, they learn how to ski. We get all those kids up, and they ski, some of them for the very first time. Many come year after year. There's one kid, he's a very good skier. And our boat driver asked him, where do you ski? Do you ski and you get coached somewhere else? He says, I come here every summer. This is the only time I get to ski. And so he's learned that skill, which, it's just a fun skill, right? But it's something that he can succeed at and do well at, and it's a great memory.
And these camp counselors that are all trained in the ladies with first aid?
Yes, all of them. All of them have first aid. we have a full-time nurse that's there all through the summer. We get volunteer nurses as well. In fact, this summer we have a full-fledged paramedic that's there this summer, all summer long. So,
how does the camp really help the kids with their self-esteem, John?
Well, you know, I think it's finding out who our identity is. You know, like there's that verse, Psalm 139, 13, 14. For you created my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you because I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. We're made by the creator of the universe. He made us. He formed us before we even were born. And helping kids to understand that. And I mean, we get them for a week, right? But knowing that they're loved, knowing that they're created special by the creator of the universe, knowing that, I mean, these kind of things, we really want them to know what their identity in Christ is, not just their identity and who they think they are.
One of the first camps I went to was in Kananaskis country. I had a lot of fun. We did horseback riding. We did so much, but I got homesick. I got to tell you, when I was little.
Yeah.
So how do you deal with that with these children who've never been separated from their parents before?
Yeah, we lock them in a room and we don't deal with them for the week.
Sure, yeah, okay. As long as they have a Bible, that's the important thing.
No, it's a real thing, and it's a real sickness. You talk about homesickness, it's sickness. And again, our staff are trained to deal with that. There's lots of tricks that we do. We really work with parents, and so parents give us the kind of some help with that, and we want to kind of get their idea of their kids and what works.
You want them to
for
feel at home and comfortable, right?
But we sure don't tell them that their parents miss them, and we sure don't talk to them about their parents and what they do at home. We talk to them, we try and keep their just what they're thinking about to what's going on throughout the week. And so, I mean, it doesn't happen. Not all kids stay there. We maybe one or two in a summer go home that just can't handle it, but.
What kind of a cost is there involved with this? And do you provide financial assistance for families who may be underprivileged?
It's about $400 for a week at camp. Maybe
what does that include?
Touch under everything. I mean, sorry, I shouldn't say everything. Water ski, there'll be an extra charge for that, just for the guestling, but and for some of the coaching. There's a few things with some added costs, but if you wanted to come to camp and have a great, maybe not you, but you can come help. You can drive boat.
Yeah.
But to come, it's about $400. That includes all your food, housing, and all the activities that we provide. And so, and one of our values at the camp is that that there's no child that will be not allowed to come because of financial reasons. And so, that's our board. That's something that they've said. We don't want that to be an inhibitor to kids coming. And so we've got funds set up. We've got actually a fundraising thing. Sorry for the shameless whatever, but it's next weekend. It's a ride for a reason. We're riding around Waterton, 120 kilometers on bicycles, and it raises money strictly to send kids to camp. And so last year, I think they raised a touch over $100,000. All that money goes to send kids to camp. We sponsored about 400, touch over 400 kids in part or whole. But we work with parents too. If they can't pay for the whole thing, well, what can you pay?
So what's the age range then for these kids that attend summer camp?
Most of our camps are for grades 2 to 6, but then we have a large number that are junior high. We have one camp for senior high. But our senior high students, we hire about 150 volunteers in staff in the summer. And so those people we try and slide into some kind of a role there, whether it's washing dishes or, cleaning bathrooms or working in the kitchen or just playing games with the kids. There's so many opportunities for young people to do that.
So there was some controversy last year, you may remember, with the federal government's summer jobs grant program.
Yeah.
You had to sign the attestation. You either fall in line with what the Liberals' ideology is at that time, standing up for LGBTQ2+ rights, being pro-choice as well, with a woman's right to give an abortion, which nothing to do with a lot of businesses, but a lot of people, obviously with Christian organizations, had a problem with it. Mm-hmm. Did you sign that attestation last year?
No, we passed on that last year, and it was about a $35,000 hit on our budget. But part of the thing is and I think I mentioned this last year, was we shouldn't expect that money. We appreciate it. We appreciate the government seeing
But you don't
value.
rely on it solely then, right?
But, well, we budgeted for it because we
Right.
figured we were going to get it. So it was a little bit of a hit for us, but it was tough, the reason why we didn't get it. But you know what? Some of our people stepped up and really helped us out, some generous people, and so we were able to cover that shortfall because of some donations of a few. And so this year we've applied again, and
They've toned it down, right?
Yeah, they've toned
With
it right
attestation.
now.
Right.
I think that
There's a lot of
maybe
backlash from Canadians.
Maybe some common sense kind of
Yeah.
prevailed, and I mean, and we appreciate it. Like, we really do. We get to hire some really quality young people. I say this over and over, when we run our programs, we can have a good camp if we have good staff, but we can have great camps if we hire great staff. And so that's our bar. We're trying to hire great staff, and allowing us to pay them helps us with that as well.
So how do parents
most of our staff are volunteers. So.
Oh, they are?
Yeah.
Okay, that's tremendous. So, John, how do parents register their children for these
It's
wonderful
online.
camps?
Online, www.sabc.ca. So, and there's a registration process there. If you have any problems with that, or you need help, just phone our office and we'll help you. Love to have your kids in.
John Gartley, who's the Executive Director for Southern Alberta Bible Camp, thanks a lot for joining me in studio today.
No problem. Thank you.
On behalf of all of us here at BCN, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless and have a great night.